You ever have one of those moments where time just stops? Like, you can actually hear the gears of your life grinding to a halt. That was me, 4 hours ago, standing in the middle of this breathtaking limestone terrace at the Oakwood Manor in Lake Forest. If you know the Chicago suburbs, you know this place. It's the kind of venue that screams old money and perfect life. The sun was hitting the Lake Michigan shoreline just right. And for a second, I actually thought, man, I'm the luckiest guy alive. We were there for the final walkthrough. My fiancée, let's call her Chloe, was in full Bridezilla mode, but I was used to that. She had her iPad out, pointing at the grand staircase where the bridal party was supposed to line up for the main shots. Our photographer, a guy who charges more per hour than my lawyer, was nodding along. Then Chloe stops. She looks at the staircase, then at her digital seating chart, and then she looks at me with this clinical, detached expression. Well, babe, she says, like she's about to suggest a different brand of napkins. I've been looking at the color palette for the bridesmaid dresses against the stone. And, Sarah, if she's standing right next to me in the front of the line, the symmetry is just, it's off. Her silhouette, it's going to draw the eye away from the centerpiece. For me, I felt this cold chill crawl up my spine. I just stared at her. What are you saying, Chloe? She didn't even flinch. I think it would be better for the aesthetic if we moved Sarah to be a special guest reader. She can sit in the front row. We'll get her a beautiful corsage, but she won't be in the main bridal party portraits. That way, the photos stay clean, balanced. You want our album to be perfect, right? The aesthetic. My sister, the woman who literally held my hand through my darkest years, was being demoted because she didn't fit a silhouette. In that moment, the marble floors, the $5,000 dress she picked out, the prestige of the zip code, it all just turned to ash. I looked at the woman I was supposed to grow old with, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger with a very expensive planner. I stood there, paralyzed, while Chloe went back to discussing the floral installation for the altar. My ears were ringing. I looked down at the $20,000 worth of non-refundable deposit receipts tucked into my leather portfolio of money that represented more than just a party, see. In my family, 20 grand isn't just a number. That was my dad taking extra shifts at the plant. That was my mom skipping the vacation she'd been dreaming of for 10 years. It was 8 months of me and Chloe living on takeout and spreadsheets, obsessing over every detail of this dream. We'd been engaged for nearly a year, and I'd spent every single day of those 8 months convinced I was building a future. But standing on that terrace, I realized I wasn't building a future. I was funding a stage production. I started doing the math in my head, not the financial math, but the moral math. We had spent $4,000 on a cake that would be eaten in 10 minutes, $7,000 on a cinematic videographer to capture our authentic love, and thousands more on a venue that apparently came with a height and weight requirement for the guests of honor. I looked at Chloe as she laughed at something the coordinator said. She looked so beautiful, but it was like looking at a high-end storefront. Everything was curated, polished, and completely hollow. I realized that if I married her, my entire life would become an aesthetic. Every holiday, every child's birthday, every family dinner would be filtered through the lens of, how does this look to people we don't even like? I thought about our kids. What if our future daughter didn't have the right silhouette? Would her own mother push her to the sidelines of her own life to save the symmetry of a photo? The $20,000 felt like a heavy weight in my chest. It wasn't an investment in a marriage anymore. It was the price of a lesson I was learning way too late. I looked at the Oakwood Manor with its perfect hedges and its perfect stone, and I finally saw it for what it was, a beautiful, expensive cage. To understand why my blood was boiling, you have to understand who Sarah is to me. You see the world through Chloe's eyes, and Sarah is a distraction. You see her through mine, and she's the only reason I'm still standing here today. 3 years ago, when I was 25, my life didn't just falter, it imploded. I was working at this high-pressure tech firm in the city, thinking I was hot stuff, until a massive layoff and a botched investment left me with $0 in my bank account and a notice to vacate on my door. I spiraled hard. I stopped answering calls. I stopped eating. And I spent weeks sitting in the dark of a studio apartment I couldn't afford, feeling like an absolute failure. Chloe wasn't in the picture back then, but Sarah was. Sarah, who has spent half her life fighting a thyroid condition that messed with her metabolism and her confidence. Sarah, who has every reason to be bitter at the world for the way it judges her, was the only one who didn't judge me. She drove 3 hours in a snowstorm when I stopped picking up the phone. She didn't lecture me. She just sat on the floor of that empty apartment with me, handed me a coffee, and said, "Will, it's just money. We can get more of that. I'm not letting you lose your soul over a job title." She paid my back rent with money she'd saved for a new car. She helped me pack my boxes. She let me crash on her couch for 4 months while I got back on my feet. She saw me at my absolute ugliest, unwashed, broken, and she treated me like I was a king so, standing there at the Manor, listening to Chloe talk about clean lines and visual balance. I felt this wave of pure, unfiltered disgust. Chloe spent $300 a week on skin serums and hair extensions to look authentic for her followers. Sarah spent her life actually being authentic. Chloe was worried Sarah's body would ruin a photo that people would scroll past into seconds on Instagram. I was worried that I had almost tied myself to a person who valued a lens flare more than a human heart. Sarah saved my life. Chloe was just looking for a prop, and that was the moment I realized I was done playing my part in her production. I didn't make a scene. I didn't scream. I think that's what scared her the most. I just took the portfolio with the contracts, turned around, and walked toward the heavy oak doors of the Manor. I could hear Chloe's heels clicking on the marble behind me, her voice rising in that high-pitched, socially acceptable panic. William, where are you going? We haven't even talked to the caterer about the amuse-bouche." I didn't stop. I walked straight to my car, got in, and slammed the door. Suddenly, the world went silent. It was just the sound of my own ragged breathing and the distant hum of the Lake Michigan wind. I sat there for a second, staring at the groom folder on the passenger seat. Then, the silence shattered. My phone started vibrating so hard it rattled against the center console. Buzz, buzz, buzz. "Chloe, that was incredibly embarrassing. Come back inside. Chloe, the photographer thinks we're fighting. This is ruining the mood. Chloe, pick up your phone right now. Don't be a child." It was like a dam had broken. 10 texts, 15, 20. Then the call started, but I didn't reach for her contact. My thumb moved instinctively to the person who has always been my North Star. I called Sarah when she picked up. Her voice was warm, like a safety blanket. "Hey, big brother. How's the fancy mansion? Are we eating gold-plated caviar yet?" I couldn't even speak at first. My throat felt like it was full of dry sand. "Sarah," I finally choked out. "The wedding. It's not happening." There was a long pause. I expected her to gasp to ask about the money, to tell me to calm down. But she didn't. She just hushed her voice and said, "Will, tell me where you are. Do you need me to come get you?" That was the difference. Right there. Chloe was worried about how the fight looked to a photographer we were paying to like us. Sarah was worried about whether I was okay. I looked at the Manor in the rearview mirror as I backed out of the space. I saw Chloe standing on the steps, her silhouette perfectly framed by the ivy, looking like a tragic heroine in a movie. She was probably already thinking about the breakup post caption. I blocked her number before I even hit the main road. I spent the next hour at a random Starbucks of the highway, just trying to keep my hands from shaking. But the quiet didn't last long. Because Chloe didn't just have my number, she had my iPad synced to our shared home account. And since I had the iPad in my bag, the messages started flooding in there too. That's when I saw it. A group chat titled The September Aesthetic. I know, privacy, boundaries, all that. But when your life is currently burning to the ground, you look at the matchbook. I opened it, and my stomach dropped through the floor. This wasn't just a slip of the tongue at the venue. This was a tactical operation. There were messages going back 3 weeks between Chloe, her mother Mrs. Perfect Beverly, and her maid of honor Ashley. "Chloe, I'm stressed about the lineup. If Sarah is front and center, the white shots are going to look bottom heavy. It breaks the flow of the silk dresses. Beverly, future mother-in-law. Darling, just tell William she's too important for a bridesmaid role. Tell him she needs to be a reader so everyone can hear her beautiful voice. It's a classic pivot. He's a guy. Healed by the sentimentality. Ashley. Lol, genius. We can't have her in the Pinterest gallery. It'll ruin the Vogue-inspired vibe we're going for. We'll just tell her the dresses didn't come in her size at the last minute if we have to." I sat there, staring at the screen, watching the little typing bubbles move in real time. They were currently discussing how to spin my walkout to make me look like I was having a mental breakdown from work stress. IT wasn't just a bride being picky. It was a conspiracy of vanity. They had sat around, sipping lattes, dissecting my sister's worth based on a dress size. They had planned to lie to me, to manipulate my emotions, and to humiliate Sarah, all to protect a vibe. The sheer coldness of it was breathtaking. These people weren't planning a marriage. They were casting a movie, and my family was being edited out in post-production. I took screenshots of everything, every single word. If they wanted a Vogue-inspired wedding, they were about to get a front-page scandal reality check instead. I was back at our place in Lincoln Park, staring at a half-packed suitcase, when I heard the key turn in the lock. I knew that sound. Usually, it meant the person I loved was home. Now, it sounded like an intruder. Chloe walked in, and she was already in damage control mode. She hadn't even taken off her coat before she started. She didn't come over to hug me or ask why I was hurt. She stood by the kitchen island, adjusted her hair in the reflection of the microwave, and sighed, "Well, seriously? That was such a dramatic exit. You left me there with the coordinator looking like a fool," she said, her voice tight with that practiced calm she used when she wanted to win an argument. "I saw the group chat, Chloe," I said. I didn't even look up from my suitcase. The silence that followed was heavy. For a split second, I saw a flash of genuine panic in her eyes, but then the mask snapped back on. "Look," she stepped closer. "I'm sorry you saw that. It was just a girls' vent session. You know how stressed I am. I'm sorry for how it sounded. I shouldn't have been so blunt in the chat." I finally looked at her. "You're sorry for how it sounded? Are you sorry for what you're doing? Are you sorry that you think my sister is a visual blemish on your perfect day? We'll be realistic," she snapped, her patience finally evaporating. "This is a $100,000 event. People are flying in from all over the country. There's a standard. I love Sarah. I really do. But she doesn't. She doesn't fit the image. I'm trying to protect our memories. In 20 years, you will thank me when you look at those photos." That was the moment the last string snapped. She wasn't apologizing for the cruelty. She was apologizing for getting caught. She truly believed that protecting a memory was more important than protecting a person. She wasn't sorry for hurting Sarah. She was sorry I was being difficult about it. I realized then that I didn't know this woman at all. I had fallen in love with a curated version of her, the one she presented to the world. But the real Chloe was the one in that group chat, the one standing in front of me now, calculating the cost-benefit analysis of my sister's dignity. "The photos will be perfect, Chloe," I said, grabbing my bag, "because I'm not going to be in them. And neither is Sarah." By the next morning, the aesthetic wedding had officially turned into a suburban war zone. I was staying at a motel on the outskirts of the city, staring at my bank app. That $20,000, gone, burned. In the world of high-end Chicago weddings, non-refundable is a legal death sentence. My parents' hard-earned savings were sitting in the bank account of a venue we'd never step foot in again, but the financial hit was nothing compared to the psychological warfare. My phone became a weapon. Chloe's father, a high-powered consultant from Boston who treats every conversation like a hostile takeover, called me 3 times before 9 a.m. when I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail that sounded like a court summons. He talked about breach of verbal contract, reputation management, and financial restitution. He didn't ask if I was okay. He asked how I planned to pay him back for the invitations that had already been mailed to their high-profile circle in Massachusetts. Then, the smear campaign started. I opened Instagram and saw a series of cryptic, black and white stories from Chloe, quotes about narcissistic disposal, and men who fear commitment within hours. The narrative was set. William, the 28-year-old coward, got cold feet and used a minor misunderstanding as an excuse to bail on his soulmate. Her bridesmaids were doing the heavy lifting in the comments. I was being labeled as a commitment-phobic villain who was weaponizing his sister to hide his own insecurities. People I'd known for years, people who had grabbed beers with me and watched football at our place, were sending me disappointed DMs. It's a weird feeling when your entire social circle starts looking at you through a filter someone else created. They didn't see the group chat. They didn't see the coldness in the lobby. They just saw the heartbroken bride and the unstable groom. The pressure was immense. For a split second, I wondered if I should just go back. If I should apologize. Let Sarah be a reader, and just get through the day to keep the peace. But then I looked at the screenshot of the Vogue-inspired comment again. I realized that paying $20,000 to find out who someone really is might actually be the best deal I ever made. I wasn't losing a fortune. I was buying my freedom. For 48 hours, I took the hits. I sat in that motel room and watched my reputation get dismantled by aesthetic infographics and tearful selfies. I was the villain. I was the guy who threw away a 3-year relationship over a miscommunication. But here's the thing about people who live by the image. They forget that images can be captured by anyone. The turning point happened when Ashley, the maid of honor who had joked about Sarah's dress size, sent me a DM. It wasn't an apology. It was a threat. She told me that if I didn't make this right and pay Chloe's family back for the Boston flight deposits, she would post a tell-all video about my unstable behavior at the Manor. That was the spark. I realized that as long as I stayed silent to be the bigger person, I was just giving them more room to lie. I didn't make a big, dramatic post. I didn't go on a rant. I just created a shared Google Drive folder. Inside were the screenshots of the September aesthetic group chat, the bottom-heavy comments, the plan to manipulate me, the Vogue insults, and the cold, calculated strategy to sideline my sister. I sent the link to our 3 closest mutual friends and my parents. I added a simple note. I'm not fearful of commitment. I am fearful of spending my life with someone who views my family as a visual defect. Here is the misunderstanding Chloe is talking about. It was like dropping a match into a pool of gasoline. The perfect circle began to fracture. One of the bridesmaids, a girl who had actually struggled with an eating disorder in college, saw the messages and was horrified. She leaked the folder to the rest of the wedding party. By that evening, the tide didn't just turn. It became a tsunami. The heartbroken bride narrative didn't hold up once people read her calling my sister a glitch in her Pinterest gallery. The comments on her posts changed from "Stay strong. Queen" to "Is this really how you talk about people?" I watched her follower count drop. But more importantly, I watched the silence grow on her end. For the first time, she couldn't filter the truth. She had built her castle out of glass, and her own words were the stones that finally broke it. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the light finally hitting the dark corners of our relationship. And man, the light was blinding. The digital war was raging. But there was one person I hadn't fully faced yet. Sarah. I had told her the wedding was off, but I hadn't told her why. I wanted to protect her from the insults, but I realized that keeping her in the dark was just another way of treating her like she couldn't handle the truth. I drove over to her place. She lived in a modest apartment in Lincoln Square, the kind of place that always smelled like cinnamon and old books. When she opened the door, she didn't ask about the money or the drama. She just pointed to the couch and handed me a heavy ceramic mug of tea. "Will," she said, sitting across from me, "you've been a ghost for 3 days. What happened at the Manor?" I took a breath and told her everything. I told her about the aesthetic. I told her about the bottom-heavy comments and the plan to demote her to a special guest reader, just to keep the photos symmetrical. I even showed her the screenshots. I watched her face as she read them, waiting for the tears, the anger, or the self-consciousness I'd seen her struggle with her whole life. But Sarah didn't cry. She just let out a long, shaky breath and looked at me. Her eyes were shining with something I hadn't expected. Relief. "You walked away for me," she whispered. "You threw all that away for me?" "I didn't throw it away for you, SAR, I said, my voice cracking. "I threw away a lie. I realized that if I let her treat you like a glitch, I'd be losing the only person who actually knows what love looks like." She reached out and squeezed my hand. For years, Sarah had been the one everyone handled with kid gloves because of her health and her weight. She was used to being the person people felt sorry for or tried to hide in the back of family portraits. But in that moment, she realized that for the first time in 28 years, someone had looked at the Vogue standard of beauty and said, "This is worthless compared to my sister. I've spent my whole life feeling like I was in the way." "Will," she told me, her voice finally breaking, "thank you for seeing me." We sat there for a long time in the quiet. No filters, no aesthetic, no Lake Forest prestige. Just 2 siblings who had been through the fire together. Our bond wasn't just blood anymore. It was forged in the wreckage of my perfect life. And honestly, it felt a lot more like a dream than that wedding ever did. It's been a month since that day at the Manor. I'm back in our apartment in Lincoln Park today, but only because the lease is up and I'm packing the last of my life into cardboard boxes. The place feels different now. The minimalist furniture, the expensive art we picked out together, it all looks like a showroom for a life I don't live anymore. I found the ring about an hour ago. It was tucked in the back of a velvet-lined drawer, catching the afternoon light. It's a beautiful diamond, flawless, high clarity, investment grade. Looking at it now, all I see is a tiny, expensive mirror reflecting back a version of myself I barely recognize. I think about that $20,000 deposit every time I check my bank balance. It's a sting for sure. It's the sound of my dad's extra shifts and my own wasted savings. But then I think about the alternative. I think about standing at that altar, looking into the eyes of a woman who saw my sister as a problem to be solved, and saying, I do. If I had stayed, I would have spent the next 50 years editing myself. I would have lived a life where every laugh had to be on brand and every family member had to fit a silhouette. I'm 28 years old. In the grand scheme of things, I'm young. People tell me I lost a fortune and a fiancée this month, but as I tape up the last box, I don't feel like a loser. I feel light. For the first time in 3 years, I can breathe without wondering if my breathing is aesthetic enough. I am moving into a smaller place closer to Sarah and my parents. It doesn't have a view of the park, and the floors aren't marble, but the people who walk across those floors are going to be real. They're going to be messy. They might not fit a color palette, and they sure as hell aren't symmetrical. I picked up the ring, closed the box, and realized one final truth. Losing a deposit is expensive. Losing a wedding is painful. But losing your soul to maintain an image, that's a debt you can never pay back. I'm William. I am 28, and today, I am finally starting a life that's actually mine. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments.